And thank you again for tuning into Procrastinator's Pitstop. I am sitting with another amazing guest for you today. I am sitting here with Penny Hopkinson. Penny is a systems expert and author of Manual Magic who helps growth stage businesses and franchisors scale with confidence by turning their scattered know how into streamlined, team friendly operation manuals, which is now accelerated through her innovative platform, Manual Magic AI. Penny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you here, and we have a lot of interesting ground that we can cover. But before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most, and why?
It's Minnie Mouse, and the reason is that she always gets to wear nice dresses and she always has a bow in her hair. She always looks forever young, and she has the perfect figure.
Okay, I like it. Minnie Mouse. I think that's the first one there, and she's the one that always sort of keeps Minnie and, or she's the one that keeps Mickey and the gang kind of together sometimes too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And I think in a way, she's a little fashion icon. Which of course I'm not, because I live in the country and I do a lot of dog walking and all sorts of things that don't really require me to wear lovely little. I think they're polka dot skirts, aren't they? That Minnie wears.
I like it. I definitely like it. Getting easing into the topic at hand, Penny. How would you describe procrastination, and what does it mean to you personally?
Procrastination, putting things off. I think somebody once described it as putting something off tomorrow rather than doing it today. And in my world, a lot of people procrastinate because a lot of people really don't want to write their standard operating procedures.
I can definitely understand that. Traditionally, they haven't been um, very entertaining for sure, and they can be a little dry to write as well as read. So I can understand that. Um, what's been your? We know there's no 100% cure all. What's been your go to kind of alleviate procrastination when it shows up?
Trying to find innovative ways of engaging people who have to write them. And I believe that we all live by enough rules and regulations, and creating and having to follow standard operating procedures, or as we know them, SOPs, is just another way of saying you've got to follow more rules. And people don't like it. And when they have to write them, oh, we've got far more important things to do. We've got a day-to-day job. We don't have time for that. And one of the reasons they don't have time for it is because writing a good SOP is a skill. So how do we get over writing SOPs, which is a skill that needs to be acquired? We look for the visual representation of SOPs and we make it more exciting. We say, take out that smartphone, create a storyboard, very, very simple storyboard. Maybe it's something that you mustn't do, or something that is absolutely vital and there is a really wrong way of doing it. So you write the storyboard in a way that it's a big, big red cross over the first image to show that that's not what you must do. And then you go on to show the right way. And you don't have any voiceover. You don't show faces, but you record little snippets of the process. You upload them to a dedicated knowledge sharing platform. And then you put the captions on, very simple captions. Then you turn those into QR codes and put them at the point of need to be consulted as needing. I'll give you an example. A barista has just learnt how to make all the types of coffee in the coffee shop. But the one thing he can't remember is how to strip down the equipment at the end of the day. So he consults the QR code, takes his smartphone, and we all have our smartphones, captures the QR code in the camera, and that takes him straight through to the procedure, which is visual. He can choose the language he prefers. Then the captions are all translated, or the voice of the captions, the audio version, is translated. And he can go little snippet by little snippet at his own pace. If it's a noisy environment, he won't need the audio, so he will just look at the captions and look at the little videos. If he has a visual impairment, he can simply listen to what he needs to do. And there is no pressure, it's just done at his own pace. And of course, it's a single source of truth. So when you have the large franchises, like the ones that I've been dealing with that have, Costa Coffee had over 2,000 outlets worldwide. When I was working with them, they now have 4,000. That gives you a single source of truth to replicate faithfully across the network, so that your experience of Toronto is replicated 100% if you happen to find yourself in Timbuktu. And it's much, much, much more fun to take a video than it is to sit down at your desk and think, now, how do I start this?
I really like that idea because it's true, and even between different franchises I can think of. Well, this probably sounds silly, but the fast food franchises, they're all run very differently over here. One particular company might do one scoop of ice, and another company has a scoop of ice, but the size of the scoops of ice is different, and all those things. So with this system, it means that every single franchise would have access to the same SOPs.
Absolutely. And there's another feature to it, because if, let's say, another franchise has a slightly different but much more efficient way of doing something, they can propose a change, and then the franchisor can say, well, yes, I think that that's going to work. Because what you really want is engagement by your team members. You want them to be able to tweak the system and either reduce accidents and incidents, reduce wastage, or you want to make sure that people stay, because recruiting somebody else when an employee leaves is an expensive business. So one of the ways that we do this is to incentivize them. What we do is we say, for each team, if you can think of a practical way that we can improve the system, even if it's a very, very small tweak to the system, which in the Japanese version of quality is Kaizen, then the best one we will reward with, let's say, a $200 voucher. You have a leaderboard for all the teams, and at the end of the year, the team and the person whose idea was the best, which saves the company or the network money, the team member gets a very good prize, let's say $2,000. The team gets to choose a training course of their choice, which their team will go on and benefit from. And therefore, the whole cycle is returned, because you have a much more motivated workforce than you did before.
I like that idea because many times many companies, you go in and you just get a little handbook, and they say, here, that you could go do that. Is that customizable on the platform then? Those different rewards, milestones and things, or is it pretty much set?
Yeah, we don't actually run the reward system on the platform at the moment. This is something that you would do internally. But it could be there. It could be suggested on the Manual Magic AI platform. There's no reason why it couldn't be. That would be an extra really, really good feature that people could buy into. But, the problem today is that anybody under 40 doesn't read any text. You know, it's not this something that they're used to. They're the YouTube, TikTok, Instagram generations, and they consume information very differently. They consume information from their peers. They don't like the top-down approach. So this bottom-up approach, where the teams are involved, makes a huge amount of sense.
And within the system, they're able to provide those ideas and feedback as well.
Well, what happens is, when you want to create SOPs and create a full operations manual, you upload your IP, your intellectual property. That gets sorted into categories, or you can go freestyle and suggest categories. And then the system develops the AI, develops the SOP framework, and consolidates it as far as it can go. And then the team member responsible for that, either that discipline or that SOP, will enhance it to ensure it reflects the brand, what I call the brand DNA, and the culture. And this is really important because we call it the done with you, done by you AI with a human face, because I don't believe AI can understand the depth of brand values. What we can do is we can write the SOPs in the specific brand voice, and then you will get the uniformity and the conformity. Because when you're putting a manual together, you have usually a minimum of 2 people writing it, and the viewpoints are always different, and it always feels disjointed. Now we've got a method of making it uniform throughout, and that's a huge plus. And then once all the SOPs are created, you can connect them either to a portal. If you're a solopreneur, you probably want to connect them to the cloud with SharePoint or Dropbox. And if you have multiple outlets, you might like a platform which is dedicated to being able to upload the little videos and any text that is mandatory, because in some circumstances you will have to have some text. And that will, our preferred platform is Manual 2, which is manual.to, and that's fully geared for the whole process. So somebody can comment on a process or a procedure and suggest a change. And if head office or let's say it's a supervisor sanctions that change, it can be adopted easily.
And that's actually one of the biggest pain points, at least in my perspective, my humble perspective, that the SOPs, I mean, they can have many viewpoints, many contributors. That can be disjointed. They can they can be jagged, and it's often a very time consuming process. How long from start to finish does it really take compared to a traditional? And then no, they're all different, but is there any way to gauge sort of the amount of time you can save by using manual magic AI?
The the um the average time it used to take working with a team for a multi-site operator such as a global brand was about a year. That is a long, long time before it goes live. In the meantime, people go off and do their thing. And obviously you don't get the standardization that you need to. So we believe that this will be 75% quicker than the average manual process, which is a huge time saving. And also it gives a good return on investment, because what you're doing is cutting down accidents, incidents, and reducing wastage, just for a start. And of course, instead of phoning up and saying, how do I do this? And taking up valuable time, it's instant. You've got it there at the touch of a phone, a smartphone.
So, what would you say is the most exciting feature of Manual Magic AI?
I think its ability to upload your intellectual property and then sort it into very specific categories. Really, the whole process can be project managed from the system. So if you have a team, you can allocate team members to SO. Once they're uploaded, they will have specific responsibility for ensuring it is complete before the supervisor or the owner of the business says, yes, I think that works brilliantly. It's the full control you have using AI, because I think many people think that AI is going to take over their jobs. It's a case of working smarter, not harder.
And as you mentioned previously, it's not the AI writing the procedure for you; it's just sorting it. It doesn't make suggestions at all at any time.
Yes, it will build the framework for the SOP. It will fill in as much detail as possible up to the limit of what you have input. And then you can add whatever is in your head to, and there will be an editing function, and the AI will help edit that and add suggestions, do a gap analysis, particularly if you have a franchise and it's underwritten by a franchise contract, which has all the heads of terms, so you know what your quality standards are. So it'll handle the process virtually from a blank sheet of paper, if you like, an electronic blank sheet of paper, right the way through to getting it published. You can export it, or you can link it with other platforms.
And this is a huge undertaking, a huge project, and it's amazing what we can do today with technology and such an amazing accomplishment. What do you think has been your biggest challenge in creating this system?
I think it's been realizing that this is possible, because I built a prototype. I'm not an IT expert in any shape or form, but I've had a lot to do with beta testing, and it's something I've thoroughly enjoyed. So I know the mechanics of it. So I built my prototype. I fed it with my database, and I've also used other clients' information with their permission to see what we can output, and the results have been outstanding. For example, the other day I did a gap analysis as a test for a potential client, and they really didn't think, they had no expectations because they couldn't solve 3 problems. They were completely different problems within the business. One was a packaging issue, another one was a gift card issue, and the third one was an upselling issue. And an experienced operator with just shy of 100 sites. So all the information went in. I asked the question, and as a former journalist, I reckon that asking the questions is quite easy for me. And it came up with something that nobody had thought of. Then we needed to tweak it because it wasn't in the brand's voice, because we didn't have a breakdown of analysis of the brand voice. So actually only this morning I put in lots of examples and gave it the instruction to develop the brand voice and the way that we communicate. And it broke that down into 7 areas, all of which were 100% correct. And then we rebuilt the SOP using the brand voice. And then we did a storyboard ready for the video, and it has done a really good job. And that's only a prototype. So the opportunities, particularly as AI is evolving to do so many good things, is vast. It will just prevent subscribers, because it's going to be a subscription. It's going to prevent subscribers from working so hard in such a boring way. I think it's going to be a tool that people will love. It will be extremely user-friendly. You can speak into it, you can type into it, and the end result should be exactly what the client wants.
I'm a little bit curious now in this prototype that you tested out. How start to finish, how long did that prototype take you to build?
It took me about a month because there was a lot of testing, and I wrote a definitive book you kindly mentioned earlier called Manual Magic. It's create the operations manual your franchisees need to succeed. The only reason I mentioned that is because the franchise model is perfect. And in the book, I describe all the steps necessary to create a world-class operations manual, which my clients have used the same basic system I've used since 1991. Obviously, we've moved with the times, but the basic structure, what I call the backbone, remains the same. All the clients identify with it, whether it's a solopreneur and micro business or whether it's a global brand. They all see that there is a wisdom in categorizing in this way. And I've fed all the information in my own database, and I've been running Manual Writers International since 1987. So you can imagine how much information I've fed into it.
Well, it's certainly a lot of information and a great accomplishment. I feel like I'd be missing an opportunity here, and my audience is already rolling their eyes as soon as the book came up, because they know what's coming, right? I always ask, when you were writing the book, they say it's 98% procrastination, 2% actually doing it. How true is that for you?
Well, that's an interesting one, Chris, because in 2022, I'd signed a contract to produce my book, and I hadn't written anything at that point. That was January 2022. I started to put some things together to do the research, and in April 2022, I went down with COVID and ended up in hospital, very seriously ill. And that left me with long COVID, and long COVID meant that, it did all sorts of things, and it affects people in many different ways. Mine was I had no mental, physical energy, and everything I wrote was actually complete rubbish, if I'm totally honest. So I missed all the deadlines, and my publishers were amazing. They said, "Look, we'll hold off until you're ready." And I found something that completely switched life back on again by the end of 22. And I started writing on January the 5th, 2023. I didn't stop until the book was finished, and it went out to the beta readers, and I came back and did the few changes which were interesting. And then it went off to the publishers, because I've got 50 years of editing experience, but the one thing you should never do when you're writing your book is edit the final version or believe it's the final version. So I had the lovely Eve, who project managed, and a wonderful editor. It was edited in double quick time. I think there was one thing that we decided to leave out, which was my description of quality management because I talked about my time in Iraq and how I did a completely different job trying to sell clothing to somebody who had a huge license. I think in today's terms, it would have been about $500,000 worth of money to put into getting lots of clothing from the UK. I don't know why I did it, but I think it was probably because it was commission based. And if I got them the contract, well, I did everything, but we sat round a table. It was the owner. It was all done in a very clandestine way, as they can only do in Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war. And so somebody passed me on the escalator and said, 2:30, I'll pick you up. I didn't have any chance to say no. So I was down in the lobby at 2:30 on that day, and I was whisked to some industrial part of Baghdad, and it was a big catering business. And we sat in the courtyard outside round a table with the owner, his two sons, and his wife. And it was a lot of underwear that they wanted to buy. And I bought some samples. And if you can picture number one son taking a sample and sort of stretching it and looking at the seams and all the rest of it, passing it to number two's son, doing the same, passing it to mother, who did exactly the same and sort of went as if to try it on. And then finally, they all nodded, and the owner told me how many of that particular garment and in what sizes they wanted it. So I wanted to give this little story about quality and how everyone's idea of quality is different, which is why the single source of truth is so important. It doesn't vary whichever country you're in and whatever product you're selling. It has to be tip top. And you have to be able to communicate that. But the editor felt that perhaps we could do without it. She said she was very upset to leave it out, as I would be to have it left out. But anyway, we did. We already had 52,000 words, which was a huge number of words for a business book. So we managed to cut it down. It might have been 53 or 54. But anyway, we cut it down to just about 50. So the book got published, and that was October 2023. And I'm now creating a second book specifically to go with the launch of Manual Magic AI.
Actually, thank you for sharing that story. I'm glad that, we had a chance to hear it. Who knows, maybe that would be its own spin-off book, that writing about your experiences whilst you're in the various industries and just things that have happened. I mean, I think that might be a little bit interesting.
Well, I spent many years as a Middle East correspondent and on the socioeconomic side, and there are many, many tales of one in particular going from Muscat to Stuttgart by car, just as the route between Abu Dhabi and Qatar had been completed. And I was asked by somebody whether I would accompany them because they wanted to take their car back to Germany at the end of their tour of duty. And for somebody who absolutely hated car journeys, of course, I said yes. And I think the most I travelled was probably 150 miles, and this was way over 3,000. And we had some adventures, and that will be part of the book, plus lots of other tales as a journalist, which I've been, it's been a great privilege to be part of. So at some point, the memoirs, and they won't be I was born and raised in Kenilworth and went to school in so and so, but it will be life stories and what perhaps a single female traveling and working around the Gulf states in 1974 through till about 70, 80, about 90. It was just after the Gulf War that I had finished, had ended, that I went back for the last time on a journalist visit.
Once you write the book, we'll have to be contacting Netflix, seeing about some making a little mini series out of that. I think it'd be pretty interesting. Three
Well,
thousand miles, yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say no, Chris. If they approached me and said, we'd like to make that mini series, that could be accommodated, I think.
Love that. Love that. So you've got Manual Magic AI. You've got this a second book in the works. What else have you got on the horizon for say the next 5 years for yourself?
Well, I'm going to look at licensing the system that will surround Manual Magic AI, because in order to maximize the advantage, I believe that I need to have licensees in various territories. It may be country, it might be region, but with training and with a license agreement, they can be responsible for obtaining subscribers and for delivering first-class consultancy to help embed those systems.
Sounds. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I extrapolated a little bit, so I might be barking up the wrong tree. But to mean that these licensees would have a very unique opportunity as well, because I imagine the SOPs for that would be within the system for them to actually see how it works.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I would like to think that it will be a unique system.
I love that. Love that. Well, Penny, it's been a great conversation. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time here. Is there anything that you feel that we should have covered that we didn't cover, or anything you feel I should have asked but didn't ask today?
I think you've covered absolutely everything. Thank you so much for the opportunity, because I would just love anybody listening to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Penny Hopkinson there, certainly at the moment, and to DM me, connect with me, DM me to my Linktree site, where I have all the articles, all the podcasts, including this one upcoming, and loads of information that will help to set the scene if you would like to go ahead and become one of our founder members or even an investor.
Love that. And to all our listeners, don't worry, we are going to have that in the show notes for you, so it'll be easy to find. And once again, Penny, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.